On Spider-Man 3, Pharrell Williams and I wrote a couple of songs, and first off, that's really kind of hilarious because you've got the man who wrote Happy writing a song with the man who wrote Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. Right? I'll say it again because I nearly said a millionaire now. Heaven knows I'm a millionaire now. It's kind of ironic. Okay.
That's going to be the intro now. You know?
Yeah.
Hello, you're watching NME, and we're here in conversation with Johnny Marr.
Andrew?
How you doing, Johnny? You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. Nice to be here.
Yeah?
Nice to be back.
Is this the calm before the storm, or are you deep in the storm now?
No, this is pretty much the calm. This is the storm starting now.
Yeah.
This is the start of it.
So we've heard the traces. How have you found the world's reaction to the new stuff so far?
Yeah, it's great. Everybody seems to be loving it. I feel a little bit like I'm sort of just coming out of the studio, kind of rubbing my eyes, blinking, because I spent all of last year obsessively creating this record and thinking about it, as you go to sleep and when you wake up. And so you never really know how it's going to go. I love it. I think it's my favourite record that I've done. But you just need to get people's reaction to it, and that's what music's about. Either people reacting to it at a show, or people reacting to it, on the train, or when they're running, or on the bus, or at home, or whatever. In bars and stuff. That's what it's about. That's what it's for. So you need that feedback from people, I think.
And in the many different guises you've recorded under, whether it be solo with the Smiths or with Other or whoever, you've never made the same record twice. What was it that you were trying to chase with this record that you hadn't done before?
That's a good question. There was a certain kind of drama that I was going for, that I managed to capture, I think, on a few songs on this, even a couple of the up-tempo tracks. Like the Traces is quite dramatic, I think, and has got a certain kind of moodiness and an atmosphere, whereas the first two records were really designed for, not designed, but inspired for the stage, really, and a kind of more of a post-punky kind of up-tempo thing. There's a couple of songs on Call The Comet that are very dramatic. There was a certain kind of moodiness in the air as well, because my new studio, I moved into this factory, and it's a top floor of a factory on the outskirts of Manchester, and that has it is actually as industrial as it sounds, so I was happy that that environment crept into it. On the first album, The Messenger, a lot of that was done in Berlin and New York, and I hear that record of having that environment. And then Playland was very London. I wrote a lot of it by the river and did demos down there, so I would think of that album as being a sort of London album, but this one is much more industrial. I sort of went with how I was feeling, and so therefore the environment, the industrial space, some of the stuff that happened throughout the year, and just how I was feeling as well, having literally written all the chapters of my life in a book the year before, all led to this kind of dive into emotions, really. So it's much more of an emotional record, I think.
And did any of that come from going back home and being surrounded by Manchester as you knew it?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of songs, when people hear it, that they'll know a feeling of this sort of industrial north. There's a song called Actra Tractor, which you've heard. And I think Hi Hello as well has got a feeling, I mentioned the train going home, and that's got a sort of a feeling of place to it, I think, and it being written in Manchester, I think, was important. Yeah, I think it's got a Mancunian side to it, but it's more the Manchester that I know, which isn't necessarily entirely the Manchester that's always depicted. It's got no baggy beats on it, at all, but it does have a sort of an industrial, dark heart to some of the songs, I think.
The first time we spoke, I've got to read this out because it's a mouthy quote. The first time we spoke about the record, when it was in the early stages with the NME Awards last year, and you said that the one thing you wanted the record to do was make a connection with the seemingly surreal barrage of events. Do you feel that you've done that?
Yeah, I think, I think what I ended up doing was deliberately trying to disconnect myself from from events, and in a way very much so find escape into being a songwriter and a musician, and hopefully making a record that the audience can escape with me. I think I decided that I just didn't want to face the surreal events head on, because I didn't want it to, I've said this before, but I didn't want it to contaminate my record. I think the kind of events and the people responsible for a lot of the events that we know about aren't really worthy of my time at the moment, and I don't really want my songs to be necessarily about them. There's one song on the record called Bug, which is kind of poking fun at this sort of viral kind of feeling that that is politics. But I didn't want to invite politicians into my headspace, really. And the more I kind of went with that feeling, the more I made a record that was actually about escape from those things and doing what I think rock music is, one of the functions of rock music, which is to put you in a place that is contrary to that and is alternative to that.
You achieve that escapism quite literally because you're imagining an alternative future, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I did was because I sort of have a tendency to write about environments and what I see, I try to avoid writing about myself too much. Sometimes you can't help it, but I'm interested, and I'm interested in exploring like the outside world, in regards to what I just said, like cities. And I don't really think I've come to the end of that. But because I didn't want to just report life in London, life in Manchester, life in New York, which is kind of what I've done on some of the other songs in the past, I found myself living in my imagination, and the environments and places. Spiral Cities is a good example. That is literally, that comes from a book called The Crystal Chain Letters, which was architects in the 1918, 1920, it was a correspondence between these architects who were designing for fun this imaginary crystal city, and they were really genius architects, Van der Rohe and people like that, and it's a bunch of their letters, and that fired my imagination to think about an alternative society made of glass in the sky. And as often is the case with my songs, it's not, there's more than two people, there's more than one person living in it, it's usually two people. So a lot of my songs are a character putting themselves in a situation, and they've got their lover, best mate, sister, brother, boyfriend, girlfriend with them, usually a friend, because it gives me some sort of connection with the audience that way. So there's a lot of we in our songs. So there's alternative societies, and it's usually, there's usually a sort of camaraderie involved as well. So the album starts, this song Rise is two people facing a brand new kind of society, not necessarily utopian, and that takes a lot of energy. So it's really one person saying, I know you believe in me, I can do it. And because the music was very stirring, so that's how some songs come about. You know, I wrote this very stirring music, and I got to America the day after the election, and when I got off the plane on the way at the airport, this feeling I picked up on in the air was, now here they come, it's the dawn of the dogs. I thought it'd be a really good start to an album. And I was in New York, and then the next day I went to LA, and my friends in LA were in shock. And I think because LA, California being what it is, and it's got desert, I just imagine these two people in a sort of a huge, wide open vista trying to create a new environment.
But aside from glass cities in the sky, do you believe that this kind of optimistic, hopeful society is possible, where there is a we and it's not us versus them like it is now?
I do, yeah. I'm not talking about some sort of airy-fairy utopia. but I think that there is a, whether it's actually a physical place, I think that we're having to adapt. And when I say we, I think, you know, kind of right-minded, compassionate people who've got a sort of sense of unity, right? You can't just be completely at the effect of corporate society every day of your life. And you know, I see it in young people, how young people adapt. It's amazing how they adapt to the infiltration of corporate forces and, you know, in the digital age, and it's quite inspiring, really.
Yeah.
So I do think there's if it's not an alternative actual physical place, it's just an alternative mindset. I'm not even talking about revolution, I'm just talking about the way people adapt to reacting against the bad guys.
Yeah.
You know, and find ways of avoiding the big invisible hand in the sky into your pocket all the time.
Yeah.
Every time you get on the train, and every time you get on the bus, or go into a bar, or go to a gig, all these ingenious, brilliant ways that particularly young people are in cities are finding to you know, live a life that is you know, avoiding the great big rip-off. You know.
So in light of that, what did you make of it last year when there was the Youthquake and vast amounts of younger generations actually came out and got behind Corbyn because it was the first kind of viable alternative they saw?
Yeah, I thought that was a really significant moment, and there's a lot of people, you know. For me, it started with the student demonstrations, you know, against the in protest about the tuition fees. What was that, like 2010, I think? 2010, 11, and it's happening. You know, it's people are not blindly wandering around at the effect of. They're finding ways to live and make a difference, I think. So I don't think it's so airy fairy or kind of or idealistic or unrealistic to be kind of for me to be moving towards celebrating that in songs. And as I say on the record, a big part of it is about me taking advantage of the fact that I am a creative person, and what I do for a living is artistic, to escape from reality for 50 minutes and make a rock record, a banging rock record. Because I think sonically rock music it interests me at the moment, the idea of modern rock, but also what can be sort of what can be explored in it, not just lyrically, but in terms of a mood. You know, because I don't think rock music is. I don't think we're ready yet to throw away music that is sexy, you know, or driving, or atmospheric, or stirring, you know. And at the moment, I don't think pop music is any of those things. I'm a fan of pop music, but I don't think pop music is sexy. I think it's really sort of, you know, no matter what the videos look like and no matter what people are sort of saying in songs, I think it's all pretty sanitized.
Yeah.
And but I think there's some, you know, there's a feeling in a rock band, and when you go to a rock gig, that's kind of sort of makes you forget that sort of a shiny corporate world, I think.
And is there ever many kind of new and rising rock bands where you hear that friction?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great guitar bands around. I think Goat Girl are really good.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they say they just sort of sound like now, and I don't even know whether Yak are still around, but I always really like Yak, and you know, I think that they're really on the money. And some of the psych bands that have been around for a bit, like Black Angels, I like, and there'll always be a bunch of people that I'm forgetting. I think Courtney Barnett is really really good, and
I reckon you'd like Sunflower Bee. Sunflower Bee?
Oh yeah, no, I've heard them,
yeah.
Yeah, I do like them.
Yeah.
They've got slightly sort of psych, and they're very modern.
Yeah.
But again, girls' voices, you know, girls are really doing it. They're sort of making good records, I think.
Yeah.
I like, but I think Let's Eat Grandma make good pop records.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good music around, yeah. Always will be.
But you never wanted to go into... Because I know you... Have you ever accidentally written a pop song, as in straight up not for a rock band, do you know what I mean?
I do have a couple kind of knocking around actually. I think Easy Money's like a really big pop tune.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I was almost embarrassed about it. And I think Modest Mouse Dashboard is like a big pop tune. For me, the where the interest lies for me is when interesting people make pop music. So I don't mean it sounds snobby there, but it's something that I grew up with, like people like David Bowie, you know, and the Smiths try to do that too. And Pet Shop Boys, I think, are a really good example. So from my era, my generation, when I was starting out, those kind of people, New Order made good pop records where, you know that the people behind it have got to live a kind of a more creative agenda than just all out pop acts. I really love great pop music, and I'm not a snob about it at all, but I just think right now at the moment it's almost been accepted that it's just this sort of sanitized, as I say, kind of outgrown kind of house music, really.
Yeah.
Sort of the bad end of house music.
And we were talking to the Manics about this recently, and James was saying that co-producers and co-writers have taken over music, and there's too much of that. And if you're going to sing a song, you should kind of stand on your own 2 feet and make it yours. Otherwise, you will just sound like another version of them, won't you?
Well, that makes sense to me, that if you're working with writers who are writing for lots of other groups, then you're just going to share their muse, you know, and their sound and what they do. That is not really a culture that I come from, you know. I mean, to me, it was always, as soon as I personally started playing the guitar, I started writing songs with it, you know. You know, as much as I find playing the guitar really expressive, it was something to write songs on, and the Smiths were all about writing our own songs. If we ever did a cover, which is very rare, it was just for, you know, a little bit of fun now and again. But to me, for my way of thinking, you have to write your own songs to be a rock musician or an alternative musician, certainly, you know. Otherwise, it's
Karaoke.
It's just X Factor does Britpop, isn't it?
Yeah. And you mentioned how there's a great wealth of female voices out there at the moment. I was wondering, how did you decide to work with Maxine Peake rather than a kind of like more traditional female singer? Because you know a lot of them. You can collaborate with whoever you want. So why Maxine?
Yeah, over the years I've found that I've collaborated with a lot of female artists. You know, whether it's Sandy Shaw or particularly Kirsty MacColl, Chrissy Hind. I don't know, it just sort of happened. But Lisa Germano. What I'm working with Maxine was that I had this idea for a certain kind of music, away from song structures and something that I could maybe possibly put on the stage at some point that was more abstract. And straight away, Maxine came to mind. I didn't know her. I just thought she would, if she was into it, she would be the perfect person because of her her depth, in a way. You know, I've seen a lot of her work, and I know that she can really bring something very, not just dramatic, but modern, and you know that the person behind it is, was just a fan, right? So I knew the person behind it was someone that a lot of people, male and female, could really relate to and admire. She's just fantastic. And that was in my imagination for about a year and a half, and then she wrote to me, and we got together, and I told her I'd been sort of harbouring this idea to do something, and that was it, we were off. The Priest was the first thing that I finished, and we're just trying to sort of find the time to finish it off now, really, and do something. But it was all about Maxine as well being particularly British. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that people really relate to as well. That in this country, that she's our sort of most favourite British actor, I think.
Yeah. So is the rest of the material you've recorded together quite socially minded as well? Because The Priest is one of the rare songs that people will actually listen to. You know, tackles homelessness, and homelessness in Manchester is an epidemic, especially. You know.
Yeah. It is kind of socially minded, although some of it's not quite so explicit, because we've got this one piece, without, spoiler alert, but there's one piece which I think is particularly great, which is about is a woman who is taking a break from working in an office during a weekday, and she just goes finds this little bit of green in the middle of the city and has this experience of quietness and stillness. Now that to me is a part of modern life that is either happening or very much required. It's sort of this idea of stillness. So it isn't necessarily people pushing shopping carts down the road in the rain. That's a very beautiful thing, and I think when Maxine did this piece, I thought it was just absolutely beautiful. What
do you look for in a collaborator?
Well, with collaborators, it's kind of interesting because, say, when on Spider-Man 3, when I wrote a couple of songs with Pharrell Williams, it was interesting because you got the guy who wrote Happy writing a song with the guy who wrote Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now, which is very ironic. And even though on the face of that, I come from a British indie rock scene, and Pharrell comes from an American R&B, hip-hop kind of pop scene, soul scene. But very quickly, when two people sit down in front of the speakers, it's like a little bit like being in a rowboat. You're both trying to get to the shore, or you're both trying to get out to the horizon. And that's really what it feels like. You've got this destination, and usually I've been very fortunate that the destination we're both after is something like magic coming out of the speakers. And so in that case, or when, for instance, when I wrote a lot of songs with Karl Bartos from Kraftwerk, it didn't matter that I was a Mancunian guitar player and he was a German electronic musician. That all goes out the window because you're both trying to create this great piece of work in a pop song usually. And that's a really amazing thing, that all of that geographical distance and cultural distance means nothing. And I'm very aware that when I'm doing it, it's a really fantastic thing. Because a lot of musicians who come from the background that I come from play with their mates in a band from around the corner year in, year out. It's, I've been very, very fortunate. I've been working with musicians from all over the world. When I played with Talking Heads, I was working with African musicians. And I've played with South American musicians, and it's always the same. Your destination is a common destination, and it kind of transcends your background. Brilliant.
But if you're constantly looking for something different, you're always an artist on the move, trying different things every time. Is there a part of your brain that wants to go back and revisit things, be it the Cribs, be it Modest Mouse, be it something with Morrissey, be it... Obviously you're going to work with Hans Zimmer again, I imagine.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you've already done that you would like to pick up again?
Yeah, well, last year I did a couple of things, little things whilst I was making Call The Comet. I did the comeback single, and which is the first The single for I think 15, 16 years, and that was a real joy to be playing behind Matt Johnson again. So I never really think the door is really shut on The, and I don't really think, for some reason, I've got a feeling that Modest Mouse is still a chapter that's kind of yet to be finished. So, yeah. Those are the two people I like to work with.
What about electronic? Go on.
Nah. Nah. Oh yeah, I work with Pet Shop Boys as well. All right, so there's some people that I just end up going back to. Yeah, Pet Shop Boys, The, Modest Mouse. So you never say never, really. But I've got too many new things that I want to do, I think.
Sweet. On that note, Johnny, thanks very much.
Nice to see you again.
Cheers.